out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is a special edition of Energy Week in which we reveal to you the stories of 2015 that we think are the most significant.
We've talked about every one of these at one time or another during the past year.
Yep.
Except I think for one.
Except for one. That's right.
We'll
there
get
is
to that
one that's
one
in
later.
here, and we'll talk about that. By the way, these stories are all available on the dates given at my blog, geoharvey.wordpress.com. There will be, if you're watching this and you're not at brattleboro.tv.org, there will be a link at brattleboro.tv.org. If you go to the Energy Week Extra show for the top stories of 2015, that will take you to a blog posting that is just these.
Just the links.
Just these,
So
yes.
if you want to follow up on any one of these,
That's a good way to do it. Because
go to BCTV.
Right, because last year I did 365 blog entries, and sorting through them for this is a bit of a pain. But it's brattleboro.tv.org, and
Not .com now.
not .com, no. And you go to the upper right corner and you type in Energy Week Extra or something like that, and hit enter, because it won't do it with a mouse click, I don't think, and it'll give you all the things that we've done that were extras if you say extra.
Just in case you wanted to do a little research.
Right. So we're going to start with a story that came from Clean Technica on the 10th of January. And that story says, in April, we reported that seismologists were hot on the trail of a smoking gun that would link fracking to earthquakes in Ohio. At the time, the experts were a bit cautious, but earlier this week, the Seismological Society of America came out with a definitive statement: yes, fracking causes earthquakes.
Bringing it up to date, this is happening now in other states. I mean, we just
Whoa,
talked
is it
about
ever?
Oklahoma
Oklahoma?
last week.
More earthquakes in Oklahoma than California.
And Oklahoma's never had earthquakes.
They have earthquakes
Not
that
of
you
any
can feel,
significance.
once in a great long while. Now they're having them on a daily basis. This
Scary.
is scary. Okay. The next story came from Resilience on the 14th of January. Analysis of the impact of U.S. tight oil has on global oil markets shows that only about 1/4 of the drop in U.S. imports of 1.7 million barrels per day since 2005 to 2006 can be explained by the tight oil boom. Oil imports dropped by about 1 million barrels a day before the boom began.
Wow. Just to explain what tight oil is, by the way, it's difficult to extract oil.
Right.
Like tar sands, like fracking.
Fracking,
kind of
you
stuff.
have to do fracking to get some of this oil. You have to, basically, tar sands, you're for practical purposes with tar sands, you're mining the oil.
Yeah.
And this is saying, yeah, our imports dropped, but they had dropped a lot before the tight oil began. And as a matter of fact, at current oil prices, tight oil you can't make money with it.
No.
And the price of oil is about half of what you need to make money. Okay, now let's do that. So we've got a picture. On the 14th of February, New York ratepayers, this came from Capital New York. New York ratepayers will subsidize operation of the Jinnah nuclear facility near Rochester under terms of an agreement with the plant's operator, Exelon. The Jinnah nuclear generating station will be allowed to charge customers above market rates until 2018 because the plant is losing money.
Well, there's a little bit more to that story,
Yes.
because the grid in that part of New York State isn't sufficient to make up for the shortfall.
Right.
So these guys need this nuclear power plant.
The people in that part of New York.
And the state has turned around and said, well, you can have it, but you're going to have to pay extra.
Yeah. And
But they need the energy.
what they really need to do is get renewable power in there as fast as they possibly
Well,
can.
that's happening. That, and they are in the process of building up the grid.
Yes. Okay.
So this is only a temporary situation, but
Yep.
they're paying nevertheless.
This next one is one of my favorites. On the 19th of February, we got this from Clean Technica. Rolling Stone, the magazine,
Yep.
published a blockbuster climate change article complete with the incendiary title, quote, "The Pentagon and Climate Change, How Deniers Put National Security at Risk," end quote. That's the title.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. Now, the U.S. Navy has posted a response with a forceful declaration of support for Rolling Stone.
Well, the U.S. Navy uses a tremendous amount of fuel.
Yeah.
Tremendous amount of fuel.
Yep. And it's
But
not.
yeah, it's unusual to hear them coming around and
Well,
backing up
they've been
Rolling Stone.
testifying before Congress, and they've been testifying before Congress, and you've got a party in Congress, which I won't.
You won't even mention.
I won't even mention. I'll cover my microphone and say Republicans with the microphone covered. But the leadership of this party wants to preserve our dependence on fossil fuels.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of money still to be made.
Yeah, and the Freedom Partners has said they were going to put up $889 million in the next for the information and advertising and so forth for the next presidential election. You start telling people that they need to have renewable power for security purposes, you're going to lose some of your funding.
Yep.
A lot of your funding.
Yep.
So of course, what do? Well, being patriotic Americans, because that's what the Freedom Partners wants us to be, and being a little bit dependent on fossil fuels, they go with the fossil fuels. Heck with the United States. Anyway, the person who wrote this article was a Navy officer, naval officer,
Oh, yeah?
high-ranking, who had just retired.
Well, he couldn't have done it while he was still in the Navy.
I don't think so. But the Navy is telling Congress every time the Republicans decide that they want to do something nasty to fossil fuels, the Navy goes in and says, "Wait a minute." And so does the Army, by the way. And the Army was saying, if we don't maintain our ability to move in the countryside in Afghanistan, we got a problem. And if we are dependent on fossil fuels, it means a lot of people die, and those people are U.S. soldiers protecting convoys moving fossil fuels around.
Which are being moved by truck.
Yeah. So anyway, our next item comes from Clean Technica, and it came out on the 9th of March, and it says, if the true costs of emissions, increased rates of premature death, illness, increased loads on the healthcare system, lowered crop yields, missed work days, and so forth, are factored in, a gallon of gasoline would cost you roughly $3.80 more at the pump than it currently does, according to Duke University research.
And in that picture, the yellow is the bad guys.
The yellow is the extra cost. And obviously, the first thing that you got to do is ditch coal. And the next thing you got to do is ditch gas. And the next thing you got to do is ditch nuclear, because Duke University research didn't get it right. And the price they're putting in there for solar and wind, both of them are too high. And the price they're putting in, well, Lazard Associates, which comes up with its levelized cost of electricity numbers every year, basically the last material that they came up with said the costliest fuel we've got is coal.
When you take everything into consideration.
Yeah. No. This is just the levelized cost.
Was that the same thing?
Not the externalities. It's not the
they're not
externalities.
even taking the
No,
externalities.
they're on this. Let's put the picture back up. They're talking about just the blue portion of the graph, and they're saying coal is the most expensive, nuclear is the second most expensive, the third most expensive. You want to guess, Tom?
Gas.
Yeah. Fourth is solar, and fifth is wind.
Okay.
And the price of wind according to them, is about 5 cents per kilowatt hour, which is the
That's amazing.
yeah.
10 years ago, no, you said that nobody would have believed you.
And the price of solar is about 6.4, and the price of gas is about 6.5. This is combined
And solar's
cycle
moving
gas.
down quickly.
Yeah, this is combined cycle gas. It is not
Okay.
peaking plants. They aren't counting those.
No,
in
they're
this.
okay.
And so, we're at a situation where the price has been tipped. Renewable power, wind, solar, is the cheapest thing we've got. So anyway, there it is, that from Clean Technica. In May, on the 1st of May, Tesla unveiled a suite of energy products, including a wall-mounted battery for use in consumer homes. The Powerwall is a lithium-ion battery designed to be mounted on a wall. Wow, maybe that's how it got its name. And connected to the local grid. It will be sold to installers for $3,500 for 10 kilowatt hours and $3,000 for 7 kilowatt hours, starting in late summer.
And you can buy them in Vermont through Green Mountain Power.
You can buy them through Green Mountain Power. This is from CNN. They came out a little bit later than this article said, but still, that's kind of a ground-shaking development in energy. Our next item, Communities Digital News, sent us this on the 26th of May. Ceres, C-E-R-E-S, Investor Network on Climate Risk has grown to include over 100 institutional investors with more than 24 trillion with a T in collective assets. The network is actively calling for an end to global fossil fuel subsidies and a strong Paris Climate Agreement later this year, which we will talk about soon. And it was also moving the corporate world. And if you look at the companies that these people have, this is just the
It's some of the biggest companies in America.
Some of the biggest companies in the world,
really,
have
yeah.
signed on to this. General Motors has signed on to it, and Ford has signed on to it. Nike has signed on to it, and it's a very impressive network.
By the way, Ceres is the goddess of grain.
That's right.
And Ceres has very important significance for Vermonters. Could you guess why?
No.
The
what?
statue of Ceres is on top of the Capitol building.
I didn't know that. Is that right?
Yeah, the top of the State House is
Wow.
Ceres.
I learned something
Yeah.
today. Okay. Moving on, today online. This is the 3rd of June. Lights flick on across a sleepy hamlet in Kenya thanks to the efforts of more than 200 Maasai women. I love this story.
This blows your mind.
At the front line of the solar energy revolution, trained in solar panel installation, they use donkeys to haul their solar wares from home to home in the remote region, giving families their first access to clean, reliable power.
These are people still living in thatched roof cottages, and
Yeah.
they're moving ahead in time
And they
100 years.
And they are installing solar
Solar
panels
panels.
on the thatched roof
Yeah.
cottages. Now go to your local installer, folks, and ask them if they'll put their solar panels on thatch. See what they say. Actually, if you say, "Will you do it on slate?" I've only met one who was willing to do it on
Is
slate.
that so?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's interesting.
I didn't trust that one.
I'm
Okay.
sure there's a way, but
There is a way. There's a company that manufactures special mounting stuff for slate
you would
roofs.
need it, yeah.
And I don't like the idea of putting, even with those things. I know that they were very carefully designed. I've seen them, and I think they probably work. But think probably work doesn't work on a slate roof, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. On June 18th, Pope Francis has clearly embraced what he calls, quote, a very solid scientific consensus, end quote, that humans are causing cataclysmic climate change and that is endangering the planet. The Pope has also lambasted global political leaders for their, quote, weak responses, end quote, and a lack of will over decades to address the issue. This is from I think, probably reliable source, the National Catholic Reporter.
One would guess.
One would guess. And every time I see that, I think about Rick Santorum, who is running for president of the United States, who is Roman Catholic, who said the Pope should allow the Pope should. What was it that he said?
Something about leave it to the
He
scientists.
should leave science to the
to
scientists. There you go.
But the Pope is the scientist himself. He's
The
a
Pope,
Jesuit.
the Pope is a Jesuit who has a master's degree in chemistry, and Rick Santorum's degree is in law. And I'll tell you something. There's not a lot of connection sometimes between law and reality. So much for Rick Santorum. But actually, I think you could kiss off half the candidates for president who are Republicans, and of course Donald Trump says it continues to say that climate change is a hoax. And I was looking that up for an article in Green Energy Times also, and I came across a really interesting fact, which was stated in an article in Wikipedia, as a matter of fact, on climate denial. And it said, as of an announcement that came out in 2007, there are no professional science organizations in the United States that deny human-caused climate change. Mm-hmm. None. So that I thought was interesting.
So it's politics, not science.
It's politics, climate science, and denial of climate. Well, no, I'll put this a different way. Let me start over again. Climate science is based on science. Climate denial is based on politics, and the politics are based on money that comes from the fossil fuel industry. And there's
Why
no
am I not
question about it.
surprised?
Yeah. And that's Freedom Partners has said they will put $889 million into the next campaign, and they are really interested in making sure that the people who fund them, who are fossil fuel people, maintain their ability to make as much money as possible. Okay, should we escape that one?
Yeah, let's move on.
The Guardian, and this was an article that came out on the 8th.
We still got New York State here, I think.
New York State, oh, I'm so sorry. This is on the 1st of July. A statewide ban on fracking is now official in New York State, nearly a year after communities won the right to ban oil and gas development locally. This action concluded New York's Department of Environmental Conservation's comprehensive 7-year review and completely prohibits fracking.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, this is from the Environmental News Service. It is interesting, and it's something that I think other states are. Vermont has banned fracking.
Yeah, but New York's got a lot of frackable territory.
Now you see, there's the difference. Vermont doesn't have any.
Doesn't have it, yeah.
But New York is sitting on top of about half of the Marcellus Play.
Pretty much half, yeah.
And the Marcellus Play is one of about 3 or 4 fields, fracking fields in the United States that are actually productive. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how productive they are right now, because the price of natural gas and the price of oil is so low that it may not be even conceivable for them to sell their product. But nevertheless, the material is there. And Pennsylvania has been going after it hammers and tongs, and New York State has been saying no, and there are a lot of people in Pennsylvania who are very unhappy about that. The pictures that you get of people, turning on a tap and having gurgling water come out that you can light with a match, they're disturbing. And what happens with the gas? The thing that's with a gas leak in Southern California is disturbing. But we will get to that.
There's the Exxon Valdez, in case you don't recognize it.
Yeah, this is The Guardian gave us this on the 14th. Actually, I posted it on my blogs on the 14th of July, but it actually came out on the 8th. ExxonMobil, the world's largest oil company, knew as early as 1981 about climate change, 7 years before it became a public issue. According to a newly discovered email from one of the firm's top scientists, despite this, the company spent millions of dollars over the next 27 years on climate-denying research. And it's interesting what happened here.
Same thing happened in the cigarette industry
Well, yeah, except
with some of the same. some of the same
except
guys.
it went a little farther here.
Yeah, they knew
Because
what was happening,
They knew it was happening,
and they deliberately lied about
and
it.
they deliberately lied about it. But they did that for two reasons.
Uh-huh.
One of which is similar to what the tobacco industry did, and the other of which is unique to the oil industry.
Okay.
And that is, first of all, they wanted to deny it so they wouldn't have people opposing them in trying to prevent their products from getting sold. But the second thing is, they wanted the oil industry not to know this was happening so that they could line up the most profitable looking Arctic areas for after the permafrost melted to drill there.
Oh wow! I don't remember talking about
Yeah.
that one. Wow,
This is how
that's devious thinking.
How sick can you get, really? And you know, we should possibly talk about the history of the idea that carbon emissions are causing climate change. This is something that goes back a long, long ways. It goes back to the 19th century. The first papers on climate change and caused by carbon emission, I think they appeared in 1896.
No kidding.
Now, the first time a president of the United States, as far as we know, got a paper that said this is a problem was on November 5th, 1965. And that was Lyndon Johnson.
Okay.
Okay? Now, sometime prior to the time that ExxonMobil had determined that climate change was happening, they went out and hired a bunch of climate scientists to find out whether it was happening. This is not something that you can determine overnight. These guys worked on this, from what I understand, starting in 1978.
They wanted to find out if it was happening so that they could fight it.
So they could,
Deny it.
so they could deny it, so they could make money on it.
Yeah.
And the scientists went to the board of Exxon, which was not ExxonMobil at the time, it was just Exxon, and said, here's a problem, and ethics demand that we tell people about this. And the Exxon board said, well, no, let's make money on it instead of telling people about it. Let's make money and get rich and die before it all becomes a problem. And now the state of New York is going after them, I think, on RICO charges,
Yes, they are. Yeah.
which means that they're saying this is racketeering.
Yeah,
This
it
is
is.
fraud. They are fraudulently saying that this isn't happening so they can make money on it. And that was carried on over years and years and years. And that's a violation of the RICO Act. And that ultimately, I think, in a worst case scenario from ExxonMobil's point of view, could utterly destroy ExxonMobil. Okay, our next item is in the Scotsman, and it comes from the 11th of July. World seabird populations have suffered a staggering 70% drop over the last 60 years, according to new international research. This means that about 230 million seabirds have disappeared across the globe since the 1950s.
You
Climate
mentioned
change.
that in the weekly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Climate change, overfishing, and pollution from plastics and oil have been blamed. And basically, when you go into the reasons why this happened, you see that there's a bunch of them listed, but aside from overfishing, all of them get traced back to the fossil fuels industry. You want to save a bird, put up a wind turbine.
That's an interesting slogan.
Okay. And that, by the way, will explain why, for example, the Audubon Society, Massachusetts Audubon Society, and the Maine Audubon Society also supported Cape Wind. And when I mentioned that at a online conversation, a person in Vermont who is well known for going after wind for everything you could possibly imagine and saying that it was just terrible, said the Audubon
It
Society.
causes mumps, doesn't it?
I think it does, yeah. The Audubon Society had been bought off by big wind. Bought off. The Audubon Society has been bought off by bird murderers. And you know, my response to that was to try to figure out what big wind was. And I started looking at that, you know, as I accumulate these news articles every day, I started looking for, you know, what was it. And it didn't take very long for me to see that there were two different articles, both of which projected that, and from different sources, that wind turbine sales worldwide, all makes, all models, all manufacturers, would hit $95 billion in 2016 or 2017.
It sounds like a lot, but I don't think it is.
No, if you go to Wikipedia, you'll find good articles and bad articles, and the good articles are the ones that are boring. And one of those really boring articles, because nobody's going to vandalize a boring article, one of the really boring articles is called List of Largest Companies by Revenue. And they list 63 companies, which can be sorted by market sector. And those 63 companies, in order to be on the list, each one has to have a revenue of upwards of $100 billion a year.
Okay.
More than the combined sales of all wind turbines. And 21...
More than all of them?
Yes.
Okay.
21 of those companies, when you sort by sector, 21 of them are listed as being in the oil and gas sector.
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that interesting? And if you look at
Putting these things in perspective.
yeah, if you look at the Dow Jones Oil and Gas Index, which is, I think, called the Dow Jones Oil and Gas Titans Index or something like that, you find that it is off more than 50% since its high in 2008.
I don't find that surprising.
No, but, you know, I mean, these people are worried because wind is growing fast, and so is solar. And if you look, you will discover that through various organizations like, you know, Freedom Partners and stuff like that, they're putting a lot of money into trying to get Americans to believe that climate change isn't happening, or it isn't important, or it doesn't matter, and that we need to have their products and not wind. Every single renewable energy source I know of, with the single exception of farm biodigesters, is under organized attack. And that means in some states they're attacking rooftop solar. They don't want people to have rooftop solar.
I've been reading about that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I read it and it makes no sense at all. But when you look at what's going on behind the curtain, it makes a lot of sense.
It does, actually, yeah. So anyway, as I said, build a wind turbine if you want to save a bird. And the Audubon Society, you know, I've seen a presentation that describes some of what they do to determine whether they're going to support a wind farm or not. And they look at the local bird population, try to figure out what the effect is going to be on that population. And they approve some and they disapprove of some. But I'll tell you something, I don't believe for a minute that anybody but a lunatic would think that they have been bought off by big wind, which in my opinion doesn't exist. And yes, I have called somebody a lunatic, but not by name. Not by organization. You don't know who it is, and I'm not going to say. Okay. Our next item that comes up, this is from the 1st of August, Dr. James L. Powell, director of the National Physics Science Consortium, examined titles and abstracts for more than 24,000 peer-reviewed scientific articles on climate change published during the past couple of years. He identified 69,406 authors. These articles are typically authored by a bunch of people named in the articles. Only 4 out of the 69,406, this is 4, not 4,000, it's 4, reject the fact that human emissions cause climate change. This is from Clean Technica. Interesting number there.
It is that.
They found, looking at 69,000 plus people who were knowledgeable, they found fewer climate deniers than we have running for president as Republicans, who tell the Pope to leave science to the scientists. What kind of nonsense is this? I'm going to say something. Jeb Bush said that Donald Trump was a jerk, and he said it made him feel good. I'm going to tell you that Donald Trump is a very intelligent man whose intelligence is limited to making money. And he doesn't even always do that well. But he doesn't know a damned thing about many other things. And he's very proud of this and very proud of that. Things that he did, like saying, no, don't go into Iraq. I think that was what he said. But
yeah, he did.
He did.
Yeah.
But the reason he did that, it was because he accidentally chose the right idea. If you say something important every day, and there's a 50-50 chance that they're going to be right, you're going to be right half the time.
Half the time,
You're going to be able to say, I've come up with an average of 3.5 important ideas per week. I'm sorry.
I'll forgive you.
I'm so happy that you will forgive me. Our next item, here they are, bossy and messy and
Okay,
all the cows.
let's get them up. Here we go.
On the 10th of August,
They know what's going on.
They
Look
know
at
what's going on. Anaerobic digesters capture both the smell and the greenhouse gas manure, providing fuel in the process. The EPA estimates that more than 3 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions were eliminated last year by 247 livestock farms with biogas recovery systems. There are about 8,000 farms in the U.S. large enough to make biogas recovery systems viable. And this is from Capital FM Kenya. Kenya. People in Kenya know what's going on.
People in Vermont know what's going on too.
People in Vermont people in Vermont know about biodigesters. We've got, the last time I looked, we had more biodigesters than any other state. We had 16 of them before California got its first one. There are 5 of them that are being put up by Green Mountain Power in order to reduce waste running into
Lake Champlain. Which is a big problem.
This is a big problem, and they're doing something that I think is important about it. But one of the things about this that I find interesting, the last VCAN conference, or was it the time before? One of the VCAN conferences, I rode up there with a fellow in the car who was an engineer who came up from Massachusetts, and he had been looking into these things, and he told me, he said, we could have these things at the household level. And I looked into that a little bit, and in fact, you can buy biodigester kits.
You can buy them right now off the shelf.
You can buy them, the digesters, yes, off the shelf. But you can buy kits. The off-the-shelf thing is like $3,500. The kit is like $600. And this is I'm doing this kind of from bad memory, so those figures are not exactly correct. But you can buy them in the United States. But if you go further and you start looking to what's happening in the rest of the world, there are millions of these things, household biodigesters, in use right now in China.
Yeah, we mentioned that already.
And these Chinese biodigesters are supplying gas to the household from the household waste so that they can cook. This is an idea that we could adopt it. There's no law against it, at least not yet.
I think sooner or later economics is going to dictate that we do stuff like this.
Yes, I think so.
I mean, in the long term, it's not going to be very long. They're going to look back at this era and say, they used to pay for fuel in those days.
Yeah, and they used to throw things away.
They used to throw things away,
and
right?
It's like, what? Okay, on the 18th
here we got a nice
of August,
picture here.
A new study has found China's air pollution is linked to the death of over 1.6 million people per year, or about 4,400 people per day. The study was carried out by Richard Mueller and Robert Roda, researchers at Berkeley Earth. They mapped the concentrations of 6 major pollutants across eastern China using data from the Chinese National Air Quality Reporting System. This is from the Next Digit.
The picture's actually pretty.
I suppose it is, if you just don't think about what it is.
I think that's a refinery. The picture.
It looks like a refinery.
Yeah.
It's hard. I don't know. It just says industrial pollution. And you're right. It looks like a refinery.
Those tall towers look
those
like
tall
the
towers, yeah.
refineries.
They do. Okay. Our next item on the 27th of August, A new Citigroup report values the fossil fuel reserves that need to be left in the ground if the world is to meet its targets of trying to limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. And by the way, folks, the limit that they decided on was not 2 degrees Celsius, but below 2 degrees Celsius, hopefully 1.5 degrees.
And even that isn't, well, that's
It's
nowhere
not
near
good.
enough.
They value the targets, the stranded assets, if we choose the 2 degree Celsius target at $100 trillion. But 2 degrees is a target which, according to the Climate Council report, is actually a lot less safe for humankind than the science thought it was just 10 years ago. This is from
So they're
Clean
doing
Technical.
more research and they're getting more worried.
They're getting more worried. Things are happening that are not nice. Right now, there's a subtropical storm going on in the northern Atlantic Ocean. How often does that happen in January?
Subtropical storm in January?
Yeah,
It doesn't.
it doesn't. It wasn't that long ago that South America got the first hurricane it had ever been hit by.
No kidding.
And that was, it was 8 or 9 years ago, but we were entering into the period when climate change had already been going on. $100 trillion. Wars have been started over smaller figures than that.
For sure.
For $100 trillion, would you expect people to lie, cheat, steal, and murder? Yes.
I would think so.
And the previous thing that we just had said that 4,400 people were dying every day in China. World Health Organization puts the number of people dying from outdoor air pollution every day at about 10,000. 10,000 people a day.
Wow.
That is similar.
Just
from
things
air
like
pollution.
asthma. And
Yeah. And that is approximately equal to the rate at which military personnel were dying during the Second World War.
Interesting perspective.
Yeah.
By the way, you missed one.
I missed one.
Clean Technical, Trillium Asset Management.
Oh, by golly.
Look ashamed.
I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed. Okay, I'm over it. A report from Clean Technical. A new report published by Trillium Asset Management has found, and this, by the way, is the 21st of August, has found that California's 2 public pension systems, funds, I love this. This is so funny. Lost over $5 billion in the last year due to investments in the top 20 fossil fuel companies. Interestingly, the report comes at the same time that SB 185 is waiting for a vote in the California State Assembly, a bill that would divest the same pension funds from coal, which, by the way, the coal index, Dow Coal Index, is down 97% approximately from its high in 2008.
There ain't no money in coal anymore.
There
guys.
ain't no money to be saved by divesting anymore either.
No.
I mean, there is actually, but it's.
They're having a hard time selling some of these places. The coal mines.
What was it? It was Alpha Natural Resources.
Yeah.
At the high in 2008, it was selling for a little over $104 a share.
Now it is?
A few days ago, it was literally a penny stock with a price of a penny.
Wow.
It went from $104 a share to 1 cent. Now, yesterday it happened to be 1.7 cents, so it was up 70% from its low. My gosh.
By the way, this is about California and their public pension funds. But dialogue is going on right now in our own assembly in Vermont
Right.
about public
And
investment in public
the state treasurer says, no, we shouldn't be divesting. We should be protecting the interests of the people who have got money in that retirement fund.
Well,
I will remind the treasurer of Vermont, the coal index might be down 97%, and there might not be anything to salvage there, but the oil index is only down 50%.
is that all?
That's all. So if you got rid of that, at least you'd get half of the money that was there in 2008.
So watch that for further development.
Yeah, let's watch that for further development. Okay, now.
Well, you did Citigroup, so the
I did
next one
Citigroup.
is
The
the
next one
Independent.
is the Independent.
Yeah.
On the 28th of August, one of Britain's most controversial energy projects for decades, the £24.5 billion nuclear power development at Hinkley Point in Somerset, is poised to get the green light, which it got. The government and EDF have agreed to a deal that would guarantee a price of 92.5 pounds per megawatt hour, just about double the going rate, up to 2061.
I think it's more than double.
I think that's double
Yeah.
the retail rate.
In England?
No, it's not double the retail rate. It may be more than double the,
Yeah.
the rate. It's near. Oh, here we go. It's nearly 3 times the current price.
Okay.
This is from the Independent, and of course, why are they doing that?
Politics.
Well, you know,
We don't know who's.
I saw a statement today. You remember that tidal lagoon in Swansea, Wales?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. The Prime Minister said he was very impressed by that and thought it was a great idea when he first saw it, but he realized
It's very expensive.
it was very expensive. And in the course of saying this, he said one of the things that he said was, "Well, of course, wind power, the wind is not always blowing.
Well, yeah.
We need baseload power." He's not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
He is just not paying attention. And Amber Rudd, who is the chief energy person in the UK, keeps saying, "Well, we haven't got it right yet. We haven't got it right yet." And she touts the party line. But the fact is, yeah, it's true. The sun doesn't always shine. The wind doesn't always blow. But it is equally true that those two facts are irrelevant in a modern grid. As we know from looking at Germany, where they say, well, we could have 70, this is the grid operator says this, we could have 70% of our electricity from sun and wind before we need any storage.
Well, the technology to balance supply and demand, it's just sitting there on the shelf right now.
It is.
There.
It's absolutely on the shelf. And the government of the UK simply hasn't got the word yet. They are... it's sad when you've got a government that's misinformed. Of course, they're not as badly misinformed as Donald Trump is. So maybe we shouldn't complain about him too much. Okay. On the 31st of August, we got this from The Guardian. The government wants to slash 87% subsidies for householders who install solar panels on their rooftop. This is the government of the UK, of course, in a move that renewable energy experts warn could kill a promising industry.
I'm missing that one.
You're missing that one?
Malcolm Turnbull, 915?
No, not 915.
I don't think I even have that one.
Well, you should have it. I'm going back and looking. Well, let me read it. It's there.
Yeah.
Let's see, this is the one after Hinkley Point. All right. The assault on solar power comes after a ministerial decisions to remove financial aid from new onshore wind farms and slash home energy efficiency measures. So they're basically attacking everything, except for offshore wind. They're basically what it comes down to is they're attacking everything except things that are going to be run by big business.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
All right, now we can go to Malcolm Turnbull if you like.
Oh, I just had the two things compressed together.
Aha.
There it is. Yep.
Okay. 9:15, this is the 15th of September. Malcolm Turnbull has replaced climate change doubter and coal industry booster Tony Abbott as Australian Prime Minister. This means that one of the world's least enthusiastic backers of a climate treaty has just been removed from the global stage. While Abbott's views are not aligned with mainstream science, Turnbull's are. This is from Mashable.
By the way, his own party dumped him.
Turnbull is in the same party
Yes.
as Abbott. Yes, his party dumped him. That is correct. And part of the reason his party dumped him was because his approval ratings had gone down to about 20%. We're talking about a guy here who is very contentious and very opinionated. But Turnbull, I don't know. I'm still. This was what, 3 months ago. I'm still kind of not entirely sure what Turnbull is up to. Okay. Our next item, and this comes from CNBC, and this is something that I really got excited about.
Yeah, this is very interesting.
This is from the 16th of September, A relatively cheap and environmentally friendly battery that uses salt water and other commonly available materials to store electric energy has been awarded the Lemelson MIT Prize. The head of the company making the battery, Aquion, said batteries capable of powering a typical single family should cost between $1,000 and $3,000.
By the way, you take a look at that picture, and it looks like an automobile battery.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's quite a bit bigger than that. It's sitting on a pallet, so it's 4 feet wide.
Yeah, it's 4 feet by 3 feet roughly, a little bit more, but and it's about 3.5 feet tall.
Yeah.
And that is 12 of their minimum battery size. The minimum battery size is 2.6 kilowatt hours, and so this thing would keep your house going for a few days if you're being careful about how you use electricity.
And you don't necessarily have to be generating your own electricity from rooftop or something like that.
That's
Although
correct.
that would certainly help.
That's correct.
But you can buy it at night when it's cheap.
If you can get a deal where you buy electricity at
Hey,
night,
it depends on your
where it's
state,
cheap.
your utility.
By the way, Green Mountain Power, when they sell the lithium-ion batteries from Tesla, one option is to allow them to use that battery at during the daytime
as part of their grid.
Yeah, and they will pay you for that.
Yeah.
So it
Heads I win,
happens.
tails you lose.
Yeah, right. It happens that Sasha Derry, who was here from Alti store, his store sells these. They've sold, I think he said 200 of them, and they've got about
Sells the Aquions?
Yes, about
Bingo.
500 of them on order. They're in Boxborough, Massachusetts, as I recall. So that's that. Our next item comes from Bloomberg.
Ah, Bloomberg. Yes,
910. It didn't add up. VW diesel cars were spewing harmful exhaust when testers drove them on the road, but in the lab they did just fine. Discrepancies in European tests on diesel models of the VW Passat, VW Jetta, and BMW X5 last year gave Peter Mock an idea. He checked the cars. They had a cheat device on them.
Now, the hullabaloo over this has kind of died down, but the problem hasn't.
The problem is
VW sales are way off.
VW
Across the board.
suffered on this one
big
very,
time.
very badly. This was an extremely bad decision that must have been made at the highest levels because, well, the CEO,
Boschman quit.
yeah, he quit. And basically what they were doing, as I understand it, was that they looked at, didn't you catch this one? They looked to see if the steering wheel was turning. And if, and if the steering wheel was never turning during the thing, they said, we must be being tested.
Yeah.
So we're going to run this way.
Yeah.
But if the steering wheel was turning, then they ran a different way. And the difference was when they were running to cheat, they were emitting about 40 times the level of nitrous oxide.
40?
Yes.
Wow.
And somebody doing a research project, and maybe we're going to have this later on, I don't remember. Somebody doing a research project figured out how many people had died because they did that.
I haven't heard that number, but I
It
don't
was
think
over
I wanna hear it.
3,000.
Wow.
Over 3,000 people because VW wanted to make sure that it was keeping its money up. We're talking about big businesses here who don't care if they kill people.
Basically, that's what's happening.
That's what's happening. Okay, maybe we should escape from that one. On the 26th of September, this is from Clean Technica, the overall collective risk of cancer via exposure to 7 toxic air contaminants in California has declined by an incredible 76% since comprehensive air quality regulations went into effect there in 1990, according to a new study.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah, from the California Air Resources Board. The worst offender is diesel particulates.
Yeah.
Now,
And we never used to worry about them at all.
Yeah, I want to point out to anybody who's watching this show in Vermont, and I think most of our audience is probably watching from Vermont, Vermont's air is not as clean as you'd like to think it is. And that's just a sad fact.
Well, yeah. I mean, wood stoves for one thing.
Wood stoves is part of it, but also, we still import a certain amount of mercury in our rain from the Midwest,
Well,
courtesy of the coal
we're
industry.
getting it from the Midwest, and you can't eat fish in half the streams in Vermont.
If you go, but if you want to fish in Vermont, you should go before you plan your fishing trip. You should go to the state Fish and Game website. Look up the quality of the water that you're
So
thinking.
it's on a state website.
It's on the state website. They divide the population of people up into two groups, one of which is most adults, and the other is pregnant women and children. And they have a number of fish that you can consume safely, relatively safely, from different sources, bodies of water, and listed by species. So if you want to go fish in Lake Champlain, they will tell you the number of meals that they think you can eat safely out of Lake Champlain in a given month.
Well, you got to worry the most about fish that eat other fish,
Right.
predatory fish, and they're the biggest source of game fish, really.
Yes.
Nobody gets too excited about catching a catfish.
Some people get excited about catching catfish.
Well, when I was 8, I did.
Well, one of the things that I've heard is that golden shiners can make a pretty good meal, and they're minnows.
Yeah, right.
But basically,
Sardines.
yeah, they're like freshwater sardines, except they're not smoked. But there is one river in Vermont. It's the Hoosick River, which is in Pownell. They say no fish. Doesn't matter who you are.
Nothing at all.
Doesn't matter what species. No fish, ever. Zero per month, regardless of what it is. Don't fish there.
I haven't seen it in Vermont, but I have seen it in New Hampshire. Signs by the river, by a fishing entrance. Do not eat fish in the stream.
Yeah.
Signed by the Department of Natural Resources or
Right.
whatever it is.
And so what happens here is we've been having mercury come into Vermont rivers and ponds and streams and lakes and whatever for over 100 years. And
It's coming from the Midwest.
It's coming from the
high stacks.
Midwest. It's
Yep.
coming from those stacks in the Midwest. And what happened is the federal government says, okay, we're going to do something about this. And instead of saying you're not allowed to dump mercury on Vermont, they say you have to cut the amount of mercury you're dumping on Vermont by 90%. And the coal industry says you're killing us. I'm sorry, coal industry, you're killing us.
That's a little bit more accurate a statement, isn't it? Literally and figuratively.
Yes, I think it is. Okay, but good
Moving right
news
along.
for California. If you want clean air, you're probably best off living west of the Mississippi River, because the people in Ohio are not being kind to the environment, and other states. Okay. On the 27th of September, we got this, a study prepared by DIW Econ, a German institute for economic research, found that as a whole, countries that belong to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development have already decoupled their economic growth from emissions. This means they can grow without increasing greenhouse gas emissions. This is from The Guardian.
Now that's a pretty heavy statement right there.
I think for a lot of people, it's just words that'll go in one ear and out the other. What it means is we can stop using fossil fuels altogether, and still
economic
grow,
growth.
still have growth.
Yep.
Now maybe I shouldn't have said the word off altogether, because we can't just stop it overnight, but we can stop you.
It's definitely a goal to strive for.
That's right, and we can do it while we're growing. The other information that we have got, the information that really tells us what's going on economically, indicates that if we cut down our dependence on coal and oil and natural gas and shift instead to renewable power, we will create more jobs than are destroyed. That's one thing. We will create more money than is lost. And in addition to that, we will have a big decline in health problems, as we saw from this last thing from the business from California.
All second-order consequences that nobody wants us to think about.
Well, the fossil fuel industry doesn't want us to think
That's
about.
what
One of
happened,
these
though.
days, we're going to be looking in a society that looks back and it teaches its children in high school what happened with the fossil fuel industry in the United States. And okay, you want to be a patriotic American and hope that democracy continues to exist. Let's make sure that people hear the truth and not some kind of lies that are concocted by advertising agents for the fossil fuel company.
Yeah.
They say we've got to cut the subsidies for renewable power. What they don't tell you is that renewable power gets subsidies that are only a quarter or a fifth of what the fossil fuels
get subsidies too.
And
nice subsidies. They've been getting them for a long time.
yeah. Okay, should we go on?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, on the 30th of September, we got this from solarserver.com. Solar energy pricing is at an all-time low, according to a report from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Driven by lower installed costs, improved project performance, and a race to build projects ahead of a reduction in a key federal incentive, utility-scale solar PV sales and agreements are averaging just 5 cents per kilowatt hour.
That's amazing. I would have never bet on that. Wow.
Yeah, well, it's going to go lower.
These, of course,
Tom.
are the utility scale stuff.
Yeah,
they don't even mention the guy who's just got something on his roof.
Right. For utility scale, what we're talking about here is
the big guys
power
that we've been
purchase
looking at.
agreements. And these power purchase agreements, a lot of them are 20-year agreement.
Oh,
We're
yeah,
gonna,
yeah.
we're going to provide, and the solar installer, the solar farm owner can look at this and say, okay, at that price, we're going to get this paid off a little more slowly than we would like. It's going to take 11 years instead of 9 or something like that. But the fact is, if you're setting up a 30-year power purchase agreement, that means that they're getting money for practically doing nothing for years and years
For
and
30
years.
years, yeah.
So this is when the installation is paid off, solar energy has a marginal cost that approaches zero. So you're just getting money. You don't have to do much to do it. Okay. Our next item comes from HPPR.
Yeah, we got a picture here.
We do. This is from the 14th of November. Texas wind farms are generating so much energy that some utilities are giving power away.
We've talked about that on the show.
Yep.
That blows my mind.
One example is TXU Energy, which offers free overnight plan to encourage customers to use less energy when wholesale prices are highest, and when more when prices are lowest, from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. The plan has slightly higher daytime rates. Well, according to this thing, it has slightly higher daytime rates. When I actually tried to check that, I found it was impossible to find out what the rates were.
Is that so?
Yeah, I called up TXU and I said, "What are your daytime rates for the wind power plan?" And
I'm not telling you.
the woman said, "Could you hold, please?" 20 minutes later, I was still holding.
Oh, boy.
Now, maybe what I should have done was say, "I live in Dallas," but I didn't. So, I have read that their plan has daytime rates that are double normal, and I've read that they were only marginally different from normal. So
So we don't know.
we don't know. However, this
If
is
it's
not
double normal, they're not. They're just playing games.
not necessarily, because what's happening here is they are not telling you how much power you're limited to between 9 and 6. So if you've
limited?
so if you've got one of those big Tesla batteries,
Yeah.
you can charge your battery between 9 and 6 and then use it to power your house the rest of the day.
Rest of the day, right.
So basically you can get free electricity. And all
sounds
they'll
like
charge
you
you
can.
for, yeah, and you could charge your car too during that time. And the thing is, they are not necessarily losing money doing that. They can give you something that in some cases they're going to be paid to take.
I'm sure they're not losing money. I'm sure of that.
The wholesale price of spot price of electricity in Texas sometimes goes negative.
Yeah.
So they would be paid to take that wind power.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. Our next item actually never showed up in the
Yeah.
in my blog, but I found it while I was putting this presentation together. This showed up on the 7th of October, so you will not find it in my regular blog, but you will find it if you went to brattleboro.tv.org and then followed the link at this show. Here is an article, Geo Harvey missed, but the photo is too telling to pass up. The article is all photos relating to the current conditions of the Fukushima exclusion zone. The reason why I missed it was because I was looking for energy.
You didn't think anything was happening there.
Yeah. The photo shows abandoned cars of people trying to flee a nuclear disaster. Now, 4 years later, the cars are being overrun by plants. This is from the Mirror. And what, I don't know, this looks like something out of a Mad Max movie or something.
Yeah, they tried to get the heck out of there, and they ran into a giant traffic jam.
Yep.
So they fled on foot
Yeah.
and left the cars behind.
And the traffic jam never got unjammed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, just coincidental. Just very recently, I saw a very, very similar picture. But it happened after Hiroshima.
Oh, really?
And the cars are still there and all covered over by vegetation.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Almost identical picture.
That's disturbing.
Yeah.
This article has a bunch of pictures, and among them are things like a motorcycle that was left by the side of the road with vines growing over it. And you'd think that a motorcyclist could be able to get out of there. But he may have run out of gas, I don't know. But all of these people in these cars walked away.
Yeah.
That's how they got away. So they were walking away from a nuclear disaster. And I see this picture and I say to myself, okay, Indian Point is about 25 miles north of New York City. If you had a north wind, which happens sometimes, and a big problem at Indian Point, and you had a wave of radioactive gas going down toward New York City, would the people be able to evacuate?
Absolutely impossible.
Absolutely
no matter what happens,
impossible.
the people are not going to be able to evacuate.
That's right.
Unless you can swim.
Even if you could swim, it's not. I mean,
No,
and you know,
there is no way to evacuate New York City.
there is no way. And the fact of the matter is, if New York City is evacuating, so is Newark.
Yeah, all of that.
So
Yeah.
is
Where are you going to go?
Bayonne. Where are you going to go? And anybody in Newark is going to drive west, but they're going to clog the roads going west so badly that I think about a traffic jam in Boston where the people driving home at night got stuck in a snowstorm, and some of them didn't get home until 10 o'clock the next morning. We're talking about traffic jams where people are going to be abandoning their cars like this. And that's what our planning people should be planning on.
I don't think they can plan. I think it's
Yeah.
an insurmountable problem.
It's an insurmountable problem. It's like, how do you evacuate Cape Cod if you have a meltdown at the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant? The answer is, you don't.
The only difference is there's, 10 million people in New York?
Something like that.
10,000 people in Cape
Yeah,
Cod.
but it's not just New York. It's
Yeah.
it's the greater New York area.
Oh,
So-
yeah.
So it might be
20 million people.
20 million people having to get out of there and having only hours to do it. It's not going to
It
happen.
ain't going to happen.
So sorry, folks, if that disturbs you, but there it is. Okay, that was from the Mirror, and our next item from Free Malaysia Today. This is on the 26th of November. This year will be the hottest on record, and 2016 could be even hotter due to the El Nino weather pattern, the Meteorological Organization said. WMO Director General Michel Jarreau, I hope I got that right, I probably didn't, rejected climate skeptics' arguments, saying, quote, "It's not about believing or not. It's a matter of seeing the facts. The facts are there," end quote.
Now, there's a picture of the effects of El Nino. I think that's a rice field. I
think it
that
probably-
normally is a swamp. Or
Well,
swampy.
it's swampy when the
Yeah.
plants are planted, but it may have been a rice field that got drained not very long before this.
I don't
this-
think it'd be so cracked.
Well,
Well, maybe they drained
But
it
the-
and then it dried out.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm suggesting.
They're not going to
The
recover
plants are
much
still
rice from that
green.
one.
The plants are still green, and you know, when I put this up on the, I think when I put this up on my blog, I posted, you know, under this a little question, which was, is it going to, it was something like, is it going to continue? Meaning, I don't know. The drought, El Nino, the rice crop, I don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. Okay. Our next item comes from Clean Technica. And my computer has decided that it's going to operate as slowly as it possibly can. The world now
Got
has...
a picture coming up.
Yeah, we do. There it is.
There
The
we
world now has its first universally accepted plan. This is on the 12th of December. First universally accepted plan to limit climate change. The agreement will reduce greenhouse gas emissions from human activities to curtail dangerous atmospheric warming and related climate changes. BBC News reported at 3:40 a.m. And there are three people. The white-haired lady is the representative from France to COP21. The lady in the middle is Christiana Figueres, who is the head of the UN climate group. And then there's the man, and, you know, I'm embarrassed that I don't speak French. They are applauding the Paris Agreement. And if you look at...
He was the convener.
Yes, he was. He was the president of the convention. Christiana Figueres looks like she is absolutely blissful.
She does, yeah. She looks quite
And
happy.
this is a woman who I've seen lots of pictures of, and she looks pretty severe in a lot of them.
Oh, does she really?
She does.
You know, I'm looking at that guy, and I say, I know that guy.
Yeah?
I know I don't know Laurent,
Yeah.
but somebody I know, and maybe just from watching TV or something like that, looks like that.
Yep.
Does he resemble anybody you know?
Nobody that I know. Maybe you know somebody I don't know.
I must.
I think it's possible. Okay, that is
I think we've run through the
that's-
year there.
we've run through the year.
Yeah.
That was the year that was.
I think on the whole it was pretty optimistic.
We should get Goldie Hawn in here for that was the year that was. You remember that was the week that was?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back in those days, I actually watched TV.
Yeah. And that was a good show until somebody who I think was being president of the United States told the network that they had to remove it.
Oh yeah.
I have been told that Lyndon Johnson did that. I
No
don't know
kidding.
that that's true. But
Well, he was certainly capable of it.
Yeah, he did that, and another thing that happened was Steve Allen went to Vietnam and came back saying, you can't get from one part of the country to another on the roads unless you pay money to the Viet Cong.
Okay.
Yeah.
That happens in a lot of places.
But, you know,
Even happens in Mexico.
he didn't.
I mean,
My
look
son
at-
went to Mexico, and he said, as they drove down the Baja, he said every once in a while they'd get stopped by a gang of teenagers with AK-47s who were demanding cigarettes.
Wow.
I'm laughing. I shouldn't be laughing. Anyway, folks, that was the year of 2015, and I hope you enjoyed watching.
Everybody's been watching that. Everybody's been looking at this thing. They probably don't even know what it is.
Well, we talked about this in the week show. This is my 40 centimeter K&E slide rule. That is what was the computer that was used for designing the power grid that we use these days.
And also Vermont Yankee.
And Vermont Yankee.
And all sorts of things that we take for granted today.
Yep. And that, you know, it doesn't add or subtract, at least unless you know the special thing of how to do it. Did you ever learn how to add and
there's
subtract?
a linear scale on there.
Well,
that you can
that's
add.
one way to do it.
Yeah.
Another way is use an algebraic formula where you say x plus y equals x divided by y plus 1, that quantity, times y.
And it adds.
And it comes up with it. But you can do that because you can't add and subtract directly, but you can. Anyway, it takes a few seconds to do a multiplication calculation, which this little computer here, will do in about a billionth of a second or less, and can do it under program control, which is why the power grid that we've got is run by people who are still thinking using this mentality and say, oh, the power grid can't handle a lot of wind or solar. But if you go to Germany, where they're using this kind of computer for organizing the grid, they say, we could have 70% of our power from wind and solar.
Yeah.
The fact that it's intermittent doesn't mean anything.
And they're not even counting battery and other types of storage.
Yeah, it's
which
70% is
improving daily.
Yeah, 70% is the threshold at which they need to get batteries.
Yeah.
That's the threshold at which they need to get batteries. So that whole thing about the wind not always blowing and the sun not always shining, they've got it figured it out. And you just use an appropriate computer.
Well, there's going to be an awful lot of changes in the next half a century.
You think so?
And I think most of those changes are for the better.
It's time to say goodbye. I've already said it twice. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Have a nice week. Bye-bye. Have a nice year.
I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land so lovely earth can stay lovely still.